Good morning, everyone. This is Jenny Singh from the California Department of Education. Welcome to number 5 in the series of our webinars that we're doing on the California Accountability System and the California System of Support. I have 2 other colleagues in the room with me, and they will go ahead and introduce themselves.
Hi, Kimberly Munting, consultant here at CDE.
Hello, I'm Sima Salavat, General Consultant here at the CDE.
So we're going to go ahead and get started. I know that we're still getting some people logging on. So I just want to go over I want to go over the topics that we're going to be covering. We're going to do an overview of the California School Dashboard. We've done this overview in all of the webinars that we've done on the state indicators. And we do it just because we want to make sure that all the participants in the webinar are on the same page and have an understanding of the system before we start talking about the indicators themselves. Once we cover that, we'll talk about the academic indicator. And then we'll provide you the most up-to-date information that we have on chronic absenteeism. And we will take questions and answers as we go. So starting off with the overview of the dashboard. So as I'm sure many of you know, the dashboard, as we refer to it, has 6 state indicators. Those indicators reflect data that is collected statewide. So the California Department of Education takes the data. We get that from multiple places, CalPADS and from our testing vendors. And we take that data and we produce the information for the indicators, and we load that information up to the dashboard. There are 4 local indicators for LEAs, and if you're a county office, there's 6, but for most there's 4. And that data is collected at the LEA level. So that data can be very rich data and very useful in your LCAP planning process. And so because that data is at the local level, LEAs actually load that data up to the dashboard. So I just want to take a moment here to remind everyone that the deadline for loading up the local indicator data is fast approaching. It is December 1st. And remember, the local indicators for LEAs only, but charter schools are considered LEAs under LCFF. So charter schools are also required to load up their local indicator data. The date for that is December 1st. And if an LEA does not have their data loaded up by December 1st, they will get a rating of not met. So for our state indicators, we have chronic absenteeism, and we're going to be talking about that later on, but we will, that data will not be released at the end of the month with all the other indicators. That status will be coming in March of 2018. We have the suspension rate. We have English learner progress, graduation rate, college and career, and that is status only. We only have 1 year of data for college and career, so we're reporting status only. And then we have the academic indicator, and we report separately for ELA and for mathematics. So LEAs, schools, and student groups receive performance levels for each of the state indicators. But to receive a color, a performance level, you have to have at least 2 years of data. You have to have both status and change, which is why you will not see a color reported for the CCI or for chronic absenteeism, because we only have status. Status is always the most recent data that we have, and then change, we calculate that by comparing it between the current and prior year. So it's the difference between the current and prior year, or for the case of the graduation rate, it's prior years of data. So as I mentioned, we have 5 performance levels. They're colors. They go blue, green, yellow, orange, and red, red being the lowest performance, blue being the highest performance. You can also see here from this chart that with blue, we have a pie with 5 colors filled in, 5 pie pieces filled in. And for red, you have 1 pie piece filled in. We do that so that when you print things out in black and white, you can still easily determine the performance level or the color that a school or student group received. So as I mentioned before, status and change, you need both to receive a color. So here's an example of how we do that calculation. And in this example, we're using the grad rate. You can see that in this example, we have an LEA that had a graduation rate between 85% but less than 90%. And they had an increase in their graduation rate. They increased at least 1% but less than 5%. Where these two intersect, that tells us what the performance level is. So in this case, it's going to be green. So performance levels, we usually look at student groups and at the school level and the LEA also of 30. You have to have 30 in both the current and the prior year. So when you look at the dashboard, we have the number of student groups for the current year. So if you see that you have 32 students in the current year, but you don't have a color, that's because you didn't have 30 students in the prior year. There's one slight difference when it comes to end size, and that's with foster youth and homeless. So under LCFF, LEAs, LCFF states that it's 15 or more students at the LEA level for foster and homeless to receive a performance level. Foster youth and homeless will remain at 30 for schools. And that's because under ESSA, we're not allowed to have differences in the student group sizes. And even though charter schools are treated as LEAs under LCFF, they're treated as schools under ESSA. So charter schools for foster youth and homeless, the end size will be 30. So some common questions, we're going to cover common questions as we go throughout the presentation. Some of the common questions that we're receiving is, will alternative schools receive a fall dashboard? And the answer to that question is no. So any school that has been approved for the dashboard alternative school status, DAS, will not receive a fall dashboard. In addition, their data will not be rolled up to the LEA. And for those of you who are familiar with the old ASAM, DAS replaces ASAM. And then, of course, the next question people ask is, when will alternative schools receive a dashboard? And they will be receiving a dashboard in the fall of 2018. Really important for everyone to understand, the DAS schools will be held accountable for the same state indicators. That's really important because our state accountability system is also our federal accountability system. So our plan has to be approved by the U.S. Department of Education. The U.S. Department of Education has set some standards in regards to what our indicators need to be. For example, graduation rate and academic indicators. So it's the same indicators, although we will be using some modified methods for some of the indicators. An example would be maybe using a 1-year grad rate versus a 4-year cohort grad rate for alternative schools. We have convened a task force, and we are partnering up with the Gardner Center at Stanford. And our task force members are actually practitioners from alternative schools. We've just begun to work on this, and this work will continue, and we'll be bringing it recommendations to the board probably in the spring or summer. Now I'm going to turn over the presentation to Sima, and she's going to cover the academic indicator for you.
Thank you. The academic indicator is based on the Smarter Balanced Summative Assessments for English Language Arts and Mathematics for grades 3 through 8 only. So Districts and schools that have students, that serve students in grades 3 through 8 will receive a performance level for this indicator on the Fall 2017 dashboard. Who are not included. Grade 11 students are not included in the academic indicator. Their test results will be captured in the college career indicator. Also, students who took the California alternate assessments, the dashboard will show the percent of students assigned to each of the 3 levels in the spring 2017 administration. So let's look at the calculations for the academic indicator. The status and change to this indicator are calculated using this distance from level 3 methodology. And this is the difference between a student's scale score on the Smarter Balanced Summative Assessments and the lowest possible score for that grade level and content area for level 3, which is the standard met achievement level. And it's calculated separately for every district, school, and student group. So, the academic indicator is based on an average distance from level 3 or DF3. The first step is to determine the distance between each student's scale score and the level 3 threshold for that grade level and content area. So the lowest possible score for the standard med achievement level. And then all the distances for all students are combined to get an average. Remember that the scale scores for the Smarter Balance assessments, the scale score ranges vary for each grade level. And they also vary by content area. English language arts and mathematics use different scale score ranges. So when comparing the student scale scores to the standard 3, to the level 3 threshold, or the lowest scale score for that standard met achievement level, remember that there is no one standard fixed point that is used. It depends on the grade level and content area. So here's an example. For grade 5 mathematics. The scale score for the standard med achievement level for grade 5 mathematics goes from 2,528 to 2,578. So a scale score of 2,505 is 2,528, I'm sorry, is the lowest possible scale score for level 3. It represents the threshold for level 3. And every student's scale score will be compared to that fixed number. Therefore, a score of 2,505, which you see at the top, is 23 points below the standard the level 3 threshold. So the distance from level 3 for that student is negative 23 points. When calculating the status for the academic indicator, each student's DF3 is calculated separately, as we mentioned, and then all student distances are combined to determine an average for the district, the school, and the student group levels. So here we have the calculation formula for status. As we mentioned, we obtain a separate average for each content area. This is done by adding all grade 3 through 8 student DF3s for that content area and dividing it by the total number of students in grades 3 through 8 who took that Smarter Balanced Summative Assessment for this case, the Spring 2017 administration. And to calculate change, as we do for the other indicators, we compare the current and prior year status. So let's look at some of the updates to the academic indicator as made last week at the November 8th, 2017 meeting of the State Board of Ed. They approved revised high and medium status cut scores for mathematics. They also approved revised change cut scores for English language arts and math, and a revised color layout for the 5x5 colored table. And we're going to look at each of these in detail. So as a way of introduction, when the standards were set for the academic indicator, we only had 2 years of Smarter Balanced summative assessment data available, 2015 and 2016. And we only had 1 year of change data. So we worked to set cut scores and create 5x5 grids for last spring's field test of the dashboard based on the limited change data that we had. And as it turned out, the distributions were positively skewed, with over 80% of districts showing a positive change. However, when we looked at the results for the 2017 assessments, we saw more symmetrical distribution, and only 45% of the districts saw a positive change. So we actually saw dramatic swings in the data in 2017, both upward and downward. Looking at the downward swing, some 200 schools with high or very high status dropped 2 performance levels in 2017 using the original cut scores and methodology. Even as the majority of students were meeting or exceeding the state standards. So one example of how that could happen, a school with a DF3 of over 116 points in 2016 and close to 100 points, say 99.3 in 2017, would move from a blue to a yellow performance level. Again, as the vast majority of students are doing very well, meeting or exceeding the standards. We also saw dramatic upward swings. So schools with very low status could also jump 2 performance levels from red to yellow by gaining just 15 points. So you've got schools that are doing well, that that have a difference of 16 points from last year, schools that are doing very poor that have a gain of 15 points, about the same spread, and that are meeting in 2017 at the yellow. So we decided that, something needed to be done. This was too volatile, and it really equalized the results of schools that were doing very, very differently. And actually, if we had continued to apply the original cut scores and color designations for the fall 2017 dashboard, over 1,000 schools would have jumped or fallen 2 performance levels in 2017. So the revised cut scores and color layout, they are establishing new goals based on 2 years of statewide change performance data that we now have. And those levels are ambitious and sustainable. They reduce volatility from year to year, and they control for the large swings that we just saw, where schools would jump or fall 2 or more performance levels from one year to the next. So looking at the rationale for revisions to the change cut scores, The original cut scores for change range from -1 to less than -1 to a less than +7 for ELA, and less than -1 to less than a +5 for math. And these maybe made sense under the positively skewed change data that we had for a single year, but we now have 2 years of change data and a better idea of what makes sense for the grids and cut scores. And we're seeing a more normal distribution of the data, and that calls for more symmetry in the cut points. The error of variance in the scale scores is +20 to -20 for every student. So although this only represents 1/3 of a standard deviation, which is still substantially better than most standardized assessments, it contributes to the variability that we have from year to year in the performance levels. So here are the new cut scores that the state board adopted, and notice that they are very symmetrical. If you look at the very top and very bottom, increase significantly and decline significantly. We have by 15 points or more by more than 15 points. Increased and declined, 3 to less than 15, 3 to 15. In the middle, the maintained, you have a nice even distribution. You're going from less than 3 points, decline by less than 3 points, or increase by less than 3 points. So they're much more symmetrical. And now I'm going to ask Jenny to come back to talk about the status cut score revisions for mathematics.
Thank you, Sima. So moving on, we did make some revisions to the status cut scores for mathematics only. And that is because we wanted to ensure that an LEA or school did not receive a high status if they had a negative distance from level 3. So under the original cut scores, that was very possible. In fact, it did happen. A school could receive a high status if they had a negative score. I think it was a -5. And we received a lot of feedback from the field saying that they did not think that that was appropriate, and that they felt that we should make a change. And so, based on the data that we received this year for the change scores, we agreed and we implemented that change. So this is good for everyone to know. We actually do listen to people when they actually provide us with feedback, and we always welcome that feedback. And it does help us as we do our work. So the revisions to the mathematics cut scores really only affected 2 status levels, the high status level. So you can no longer receive a high status level if you have less than 0. So the score here is 0 to 34.9 points. And then the medium was adjusted. It was the -25 points is still the same, but it's to less than 0 now. So those were the only 2 changes made to the status cut scores. So the rationale for the changes to the color layout is because of the volatility, we felt that it was really necessary to only have 2 colors per row. And that would ensure that if a school or an LEA or a student group, if they maintained their status level, they would always be assigned 1 of 2 colors, regardless of their change. So remember, if you have a huge change and you change status levels, you go from high to very high, or you go from very high to high, there's a chance that the colors will be different. So large changes, you will see schools could go from a green to a yellow, but they have to change status at the high levels. So schools with a very high status can only move from blue to green if they decline, and schools with a very low status can only move from red to orange if it increases. So here is our revised ELA 5x5 colored table. You can see here the change scores, the scores for change, the cut scores for change are new. So you can see that. There's no change to the status the cut scores for ELA. And then you can see the asterisks in the boxes. Those are the ones where we change the colors. You can see that we maintained the same number of blues, so we didn't change that. We've actually increased the number of greens. So we have schools we have more green boxes than we had in the past. We have one fewer yellow box, and we have the same number of orange boxes, but they're arranged differently than they were in the previous 5x5. And then here's the 5x5 for mathematics. Again, you can see the change scores are here. The change scores for ELA and math are now the same. They're no different. And you can see here that we made a change to the status, to the high status and to the medium status for the cut scores. And again, here we only have two colors per row. So some common questions that we get about the academic indicator is which English learners are included in the student group. So we are looking at all current English learners and students who are reclassified within the past 4 years. And so that date we're looking at when we do our programming is anyone reclassified after April 15th, 2013, they will be included in the EL student group. We had a very large, we had a very long conversation with the State Board and a very good conversation with the State Board about this, and the decision was made that this academic indicator really should be evaluating a school or an LEA's ELD program, and that's why they decided to include 4 years of English learners in the RFET students in the EL group. So which EL students are not included in the calculations for the academic indicator? It's those EL students who have enrolled in a U.S. school for less than 1 year. Those students will not be included in the calculations for either ELA or mathematics. And so, of course, everyone's always asking us, how do we know, what date are we using for this? And so we are looking at students enrolled after April 15th, 2016. So another thing that provides some confusion is that we have, students who have been in the country for less than a year are exempt from taking the ELA assessment, but they're not exempt for taking the math assessment. However, we are not taking the scores of the math assessment and including them in the calculations for the mathematics. So even though students are required to take the math assessment, if they've been in the country for less than a year, they will not be included in the calculation. And the same is true for ELA. So we do have some students who actually have been in the country for less than a year and they take the ELA exam. That's fine. It's their choice to take it. It's a local decision. It's a student decision, a parent decision, but we will not include those results in our calculations. We're being asked if the participation rate is going to be reported in the fall dashboard, and it will not. We will report it for the first time in the fall 2018 dashboard release. The participation rate is part of our SS State Plan. Our SS State Plan has not yet been approved. So we will not be including it in the fall release. We are, though, still obligated to report the participation rate to the U.S. Department of Education, and we are still obligated to have a 95% participation rate. And the U.S. Department of Education expects all LEAs and schools to meet this 95% participation rate. People are already starting to ask about the California Science Test, or CAS, and whether that's going to be included in the academic indicator. And of course, we can't include it for the fall because we don't have any data yet. So the earliest that the board can really begin discussions about this is when the CAS becomes operational, which is in 2018-19. So before we move on, are there any questions that we need to answer, Kimberly?
Sure. Someone asked if there's any kind of tool that can be used for schools to calculate their distance from level 3.
Unfortunately, we have not produced a tool to do that. It is a fairly simple calculation, but I mean, if you're a large school or a large district, you would actually need to program that because it would take a long time to do it by hand. But it is a quite simple calculation.
The only thing to note is that additional students from the file would be only continuously enrolled students are included.
That's a very good point, Kimberly. Thank you. We do have inclusion and exclusion rules, and those are provided in our technical guide. The one that has the largest impact is the student must be continuously enrolled. Continuously enrolled is defined as being at the school from fall census day through the first day of testing with no break of enrollment of more than 30 days. That's the one that has the largest impact. The second impact is probably the English learners who have been in the country for less than a year.
Could you talk a little bit more about how the cut points were originally made and how the ones that were made this time around, i.e. 80th percentile or 60th percentile? I'm assuming they're referring to the cut scores.
Yes, so the cut scores for the academic indicator were done exactly like they were done for all the other indicators. We took the distributions of all LEAs and charter schools, because charter schools are considered LEAs under LCFF. We took the distribution for the status, and we devised 4 cut scores based on those distributions. That gave us 5 levels. And we did the same for change. Right? Except for change, we divided it up into 2 cut scores for positive change and 2 cut scores for negative change. And based on the distributions that we had in 2016, it was very different from the distributions in 2017. So we reran the distributions for 2017 and realized that we had to make a change to the cut scores.
Someone had a question about students who are new to the U.S. Within the last year, and which of the 2 academic indicators their scores are included within.
So if they've been in the country for less than a year, they're not included in ELA or math. However, just a note, they are required to take the mathematics assessment, and so they are included in the participation rate. So when we do the participation rate next year, if a student is in the country for less than a year and they don't take the test, they will count against the participation rate.
Does the California School Dashboard Technical Guide for 2017-18 school year that's currently available in the private preview reflect the changes to the 5x5 credits?
I do. Simon, do you know the answer to that question?
Yes.
Are you sure? Was it updated? I don't.
The one that appears right now, I believe it's.
To be honest, I don't know the answer to that question. I don't believe it was updated. We loaded the guide up in the preview site before we had the state board meeting. I don't believe it has been updated, but we will be doing an updated guide that will be available by the time the web or the dashboard goes public.
Okay. Could you provide some additional insights into your rationale for deciding where to select the distributions for the cut scores?
Well, I mean, they were based on the distributions, as we did with all the other indicators. We always set the cut score for high first, and we set the low cut scores second. And then we tried to get a more or less even distributions throughout the other colors. We try to take the center. Kim, what percent are usually in the yellow distribution?
we tried to capture about, I think, 35 to 40% within the yellow to go through. But, you know, that's the, knowing that most people are in the center of the distribution. And it really depended on how wide that spread was and how inclusive it was.
Thank you, Kim.
We have another question about the privacy of the data. Is all of this data under embargo until the date of public release?
Yes, it is. So we put that in our communications when we first sent it out, that this is not something that you should be sharing with the public or with the media until it goes public. We provide this for two purposes, really. One, to allow LEAs to have a good understanding of their data and how they're going to communicate that to their stakeholders when it becomes public. And two, we ask you to look at the dashboard to determine if maybe we made a mistake in our calculations. You know your data better than we do. So if you think that a mistake was made, please call us and talk to us about it, and we investigate every single call we receive, because we want to make sure that if there are any calculation errors, that they are corrected before the public release.
Another question came through on, since the cut scores for ELA and math were revised, does this mean that we should not compare the spring 2017 levels to the fall 2017 levels?
That's exactly right. Do not compare. And we are actually going to be putting out communications to that effect. We've also changed how we calculate the LP, so you really can't compare that either. And with the LP and with the suspension data, we're using completely different data. We're skipping years. So comparison between those is really not appropriate either.
We have a question about the participation rate. If participation isn't included in the current fall 2017 dashboard, but it's still reported, how do we know what those rates are?
Well, unfortunately, we don't have any plans to post that up on the website, but we have been, the U.S. Department of Education has required that we actually send out notifications to LEAs that have not met the participation rate, and so we do assume that we will be required to do that again this year. So for those LEAs that don't make it, they will probably receive a notification.
Is there an official date for the public release?
We do not have an official date yet. We are hoping to have the public release on the week of November 27th.
Will we be taking down the spring 2017 ratings since they are different?
We will not be taking those ratings down, but like I said, we are going to try to make sure that our communication is very clear, that there is, it's inappropriate to make a comparison between the spring dashboard and the fall dashboard. We did have conversations about whether we should take it down or not, and we felt that to be transparent, we should probably leave the data up. And so that's what we decided, but we really want to make sure that people understand that it's really inappropriate to make comparisons.
Someone had a question, just going back a little bit. It looks like we're skipping all over the place. People have a lot of questions on a lot of indicators, which is fine. So if you do have any other questions about something that's not just the academic indicator, please share with us so we can answer it. Someone wanted to know about the local indicators and DAS schools, and which DAS schools would be required for updating their local indicators.
Well, that's a really good question, because charter schools that are DAS are required to upload their local indicators. We sent a communication out to these schools letting them know that they must upload their data. So they will receive a report on the dashboard, much like the county offices. There will be no state indicators reported, but parents will be able to go and look at the local indicators.
Someone here has a small school, 90 students, K-12. and they have less than 15 students per grade level. And it looks like they're receiving an NA for their academic indicators. And they're wondering, I'm assuming it's across student groups, is this what they should be expecting under this new accountability system?
So I would like you to send us an email and we can check that out. It's hard to know how to reply unless I actually look at the dashboard. I would assume that if you have students who took the test that you would not receive an NA, you would receive an asterisk. So please send us an email and we will follow up on that.
Are there any repercussions for LEAs that do not meet the 95% participation rate?
As I said, last year, the U.S. Department of Education required us to send out a letter to LEAs indicating that they did not meet the participation rate and for them to develop a plan to meet that participation rate for the 2017. So I'm assuming the U.S. Department of Education will require us to do that again this year. We haven't heard from them yet, but we believe that that may be the case.
So I had a question about differentiated assistance for LEAs and how LEAs would qualify for that differentiated assistance. I think they may, there's a little confusion that they felt that it was multiple years of red data that would qualify them rather than their current year scores.
Yes, that is incorrect. We are going to be looking at the dashboard, the 2017 fall dashboard, to make determinations of which LEAs will receive support under LCFF. For this year, we only have 3 priority areas. Remember, we're looking at student group performance across priority areas. Those priority areas are 4, 5, and 6. So it's academic, which is ELA and math and the LP, and then we have the graduation rate and the suspension rate. So if you have a student group that is red in suspension and red in grad rate, the LEA will get identified. It's a little more complicated when we look at the academic indicator because you can have red in one and orange in the other. So red in ELA or math and then orange in ELA or math. So it's a little more complicated when it comes to the priority area 4 paired up with priority areas 5 and 6.
Someone was asking about the local indicators and worried that since the public release wouldn't be happening until December 1st, that they wouldn't be able to update their local indicators just in the final week of November if it was released then. So a little bit of confusion as to when the local indicators should be updated.
So your dashboard coordinators have had access to and the ability to upload the local indicators for several months now. They had it all of last year, and then we purged the list of dashboard coordinators like we're going to do every year. We did that in July, and everyone had to resubmit. So as soon as they resubmitted, they actually had access to the dashboard to upload their local indicators. So if you still don't have a dashboard coordinator or you don't know who your dashboard coordinator is, you should be contacting you should send an email to the LCFF mailbox.
How does the dashboard distinguish between groups of, between student groups with N sizes between 12 and 29?
So you have to have an N size of 30 to get a performance level, but for transparency purposes, if you have between 11 and 29, we'll report status and change. There will be no performance color. And of course, we don't report for less than 11 for privacy reasons.
What would be your advice on how to assess a school's improvement on the academic indicator from year to year if we can't compare it from spring to fall?
Well, you do have your own data and your own data files. So I would suggest that you actually look at the performance of your schools based on the data files that you have and make the comparison that way. And that should help you as you do your LCAP planning process.
Additionally, we will be providing updated multiple years of status data within the detailed reports on the dashboard coming through.
That is true.
So you'll be able to see, and it's currently not available in the private preview. It looks like it did, it looks on the live site. But we will be providing 3 years of status data for all of the indicators that we have data for. So that's an easy way to see how your data is changing year over year.
And thank you, Kimberly, for reminding me about that, because that should be ready to go when we do the public release.
If your LB is orange and red in suspension, would this be an assistance district or only orange for the academic indicator?
So in this case with the LB has to be red. The orange only applies to ELA and math.
And yes, suspension would, a red in suspension would earn you a trigger for priority area 6 as, so you would also need to have a trigger in either priority 4 or priority 5 in order to receive differentiated assistance.
Right. So there will be some LEAs that will probably be identified because they miss suspension and grad weight and will be associated with the academics.
I apologize, there's many questions coming in. Someone was wondering why the spring 2017 data won't be recalculated with the new cut scores for academic.
Well, I mean, we based those calculations on the distribution at that time. I think it would be quite confusing because the results would be very different if we did that. And then people would be wondering why they went from a blue to a yellow, or a yellow to a red. So we're going to leave the 2007 the spring dashboard as it is, and communicate that you really shouldn't be doing comparisons between those two, the spring and the fall. Again, we will be providing the status for all 3 years on the detailed reports, so that should be helpful.
Question is, why aren't we reporting high school math and ELA on the dashboard?
We actually are reporting it on the dashboard. So even though it's part of the CCI, we are reporting on the dashboard. When you go into the CCI, you scroll down to the bottom, you should see the distance for level results, status and change for grade 11. And then we are also working on developing some detailed reports for the CCI that will be on the CDE webpage. And those reports will tell you how many students met each of the criteria for the prepared level and for the approaching prepared level. So for instance, it will tell you how many students were prepared because they were a level 3 on the Smarter Balance, or because they scored a 3 on 2 AP exams. So that data will be available when the public data is released. We're still working on that, so we're not going to be able to preview that data.
If an LEA has one student group in red for an academic indicator and a different student group for red and suspension, would they qualify for technical assistance?
No, they would not qualify. We're looking at the same student group. So the same student group has to be red in the academic and red in suspension.
Are the State Board academic indicator ESSA targets remaining the same, i.e. high status and maintain for change?
Well, we will be going to the board in January. We will be putting forth a recommendation that it stays the same, but of course, we have to wait for the board to approve that.
A couple of things coming through. Will there be a discussion of chronic absenteeism?
As soon as we finish answering these questions, we'll move on to chronic absenteeism.
Okay. One more question just came up in chat. And An asterisk is currently provided on the dashboard for student groups that range from 0 to 29. Can the CDE add a symbol to the dashboard to show the student groups between N sizes of 11 and 29?
Well, we did have that discussion, and we made the decision not to do that because we wanted to keep the dashboard as simple as possible with as little text as needed, because we wanted it to really be parent-friendly and friendly for anyone in the public to use. So I don't think we will be doing that. Okay, so let's move forward with the rest of the slides. Webinar 6, using the dashboard in the local control in the LCAP planning process, is going to be December 6th. Remember, LEAs are required to use the information in the dashboard in their LCAP planning process. So I would highly encourage everyone to participate in this webinar that's coming up on December 6th. Okay, so we did take chronic absenteeism to the board in November, last week, and we were able to determine that the chronic absenteeism data that was reported was of fairly high quality. So we were really happy about that. We weren't sure that was going to be the case, because usually when we collect data for the first time in CalPADS, the data is not of high quality. But because this data was based on attendance data that is reported already to the department, I think that's really one of the reasons why the data was of high quality. So we did say that we thought it was appropriate to use this data for accountability purposes. Of course, we still have some work to do. We have to set distributions and do some analysis, and we'll be bringing that back to the board in March for them to make a decision about the proposed status cut scores. If they make the decision in March, we will update the dashboard to include chronic absenteeism. We are working hard to get the chronic absenteeism data up onto DataQuest, and we are actually going to be able, we want to link anyone who is in the dashboard. If they actually click on chronic absenteeism, it will take them to the DataQuest report. You will notice that that link is working right now, but it will take you to the enrollment report. That's because we wanted to make sure that our dashboard was ready to link to the chronic absenteeism when we went live, because we're going to try to go live at the same time with chronic absenteeism as with our dashboard. So the programming was done for that, and as soon as we have a URL, we'll replace the enrollment URL with the chronic absenteeism URL. And then, of course, we will go to the board in September or November after we have the second year of chronic absenteeism data to propose the change cut scores. So the fall 2018, we will have status and change, and therefore a performance level. So here's a look at the design of the DataQuest report. You'll be able to go on there, and you'll be able to use the same filters as you can now use for your enrollment reports, and you can get your data that way. And you can see here that we've also got some grades in here, so you can look at grades K3, 4, 6, 7, 8, and K8, and 9, 12. Some people have asked, why don't we have it by single grades? And there's just so many small schools in California that a lot of schools wouldn't get data that way, and that's why we combined the grade so we could report the data out without having fear of privacy issues. And then this chart just shows how that data is going to be reported. So we're going to report if you have less than 5% of your students that are chronically absent, between 5% and less than 10%, and then greater than 10% and less than 20%, and greater than 20%. So we're going to be reporting all of this data out at the school level and at the student group level. So even though we won't have it on the dashboard until March, you will have access to this data that can help you in your LCAP planning process. So we do have some resources. We have our technical guide that's out there. It's a draft technical guide. We will be updating it to reflect the reflect the decisions made at the November board, and we've actually received a little bit of feedback on it, so so we'll be making some additional edits based on the feedback that we've seen. So the final version is going to be posted on the website probably before the public release, because we're almost complete, so we're hoping maybe sometime next week if that's possible. We just want to recommend that you view the key changes to the dashboard in the What's New section. It's only a couple of pages versus the 120 for the whole technical guide, and we think that would be very helpful for you. We also have a new parent guide up. We're really happy about that. We think that it will be easier for parents to read. We've had that translated into multiple languages, and I don't know if it's up yet. My staff they were working on it yesterday while I was at a conference down in Southern California, but the translations should be up well before the dashboard becomes public. So we do have some new resources that will be coming soon. We're still working on them, but we want to make you aware of them. We have some flyers and some modules that will be available. So the flyers are either 1 page or 2 pages, and they cover topics like the introduction to the dashboard. We had that last year, but we're updating it because there's some changes that have occurred. Of course, we're going to have something on the academic indicator because that's changed quite a bit. We have a new flyer out about the 5x5 colored tables. We've created a new flyer for the CCI. We're in the process of creating a new flyer for the Dashboard Alternative School Status, or DAS. We have a new flyer for status and change, and we also have one that who's included in the English Learner Student Group. As you know, that varies by indicator, and that can be quite confusing, so we've developed a flyer that will be easy. We also have some modules that are narrated PowerPoints on how each of the state indicators is calculated. So that will be going up shortly. Hopefully that will be up by the time we do the public release. So that will be something that's really intended for personnel at the LEA and maybe administrators at the school level. It's not intended for parents. Although they're certainly welcome if they want to review them. They're there for them to review. So the release, currently, the focus is trying to release on the week of November 27th. And then on December 1st, that's when the local indicators submission closes. So if you don't have your data uploaded for the local indicators on December 1st, your rating status is going to be locked, and that rating status will be not met. So if you have questions about that, we suggest that you contact the local agency system support office, and they can provide you assistance on that. And I'm going to go ahead and put up the contact information for us if you have questions about the indicators, the state indicators, and for the local agency system support office if you have questions about LCFS. And we'll take any other questions that may be coming in.
Okay. Someone asked about the alignment between the dashboard indicators and DataQuest, for example, graduation, and if all of the dashboard numbers and results would match what they find on DataQuest.
So those numbers are not going to match because for the 2017 fall dashboard, remember we removed charter schools, and that's all charter schools, direct funded and locally funded, and we remove the alternative schools. So when you go up to DataQuest, you will see all of the data for charter schools incorporated for locally funded charters. They only remove direct funded charters. And they also include the data for the alternative schools. There are some filters that you can filter, so you can remove all charter schools, but it still won't quite match because there's no filter to take out alternative schools.
Will the chronic absenteeism results be available for preview before the DataQuest reports are made publicly available?
There will be a preview period. It's going to be a very short one because it's a lot of work, and we're still actually processing it. So we're hoping to give a 2-day preview on that. And of course, when that becomes available for preview for LEAs, dashboard coordinators and accountability coordinators will also have access to that for preview.
Someone had a question about the fact that when you generate reports, there's no option for other in gender. And as far as adding this as a student group, there's no gender reporting within the dashboard as far as results goes. So male and female are not student groups. So therefore, an other would not become a student group. Will demographics be updated after the Fall 1 amendment window closes, or are demographics based on the 16-17 Fall 1 certified data?
So the demographics are based on an extract from CalPADS, and we extract from the ODS. So we do not extract certified data for our demographics. We sent out notices to everyone and when we were going to extract that data, and we did do the extraction, I believe it was September 1st. That was after all the amendment windows closed for the end of year submission. So we're trying to align our extracts at about the same time, but we are taking the demographic data from the ODS. That allows schools and districts additional opportunities to make corrections before we extract the data for the calculation of our academic indicator. But, so I should be clear that the demographic extract is only for the academic indicator. And for things like the graduation rate and the suspension rate, that is taken from CalPADS data, which has been certified. So there's quite a few questions about extracting from CalPADS and if extractions are happening prior to the December 1st release and things. So I think maybe Jenny just went over in detail about it, but maybe a more larger overview about when we're getting all of this data that has populated the Fall 2017 dashboard. So as I said, for suspension, that is taken from the data that has been certified at the end of the year. So we do take that data directly out of CalPADS. We extracted that data shortly after the end of the year submission window. It was extended this year, so I think it was October 25th. So we went ahead and did the extraction on September 1st for the demographic data for the academic indicator. But our data office, the people who produce data quests, extracted, I believe, that data 2 days after the submission window. So we need a day for CalPADS to get caught up so we can extract the data. So suspension data is coming directly out of what was certified. Graduation data, that data is taken out of the ODS because we can't use certified data because we're looking at a cohort of students, and we're also looking at the lost transfers, so that's coming out of ODS, but that was extracted shortly after the window closed. You might recall we gave LEAs a second opportunity to amend their grad data and their A through G data, and I believe that window closed at the end of June. So that data was extracted in July. Is that correct? Yeah. And of course, with chronic absenteeism, we're taking the data was extracted after the window closed for submission. That's based on certified data. The LP data, of course, is taken from our testing vendor. So that data is the full, that includes all students who were tested in the 16-17 school year. So it's not just those students who were tested in the LP testing window. So it's all tests throughout the year. And am I missing any other indicators? I think that's it. So I know it's complicated, so they're all coming, we're trying to align as much as possible, but there's only so we can't align the data that we get from our testing vendors with the extraction with the end of the submission windows.
There's a bunch of questions popping in. Where do you get dual enrollment information? Is it directly from CalPADS or through some other source?
So the dual enrollment information comes directly from CalPADS. So we extracted that data after the data was certified. So we are looking at those course data. We get a lot of questions about what counts as dual enrollment. So we have some new course codes that we have in CalPADS that were created for this. And it's any class where a student receives actual college credit and earned a C- or better. They get counted as dual enrollment. I know that some districts are having a difficult time for students who take courses in the summer or who take courses that aren't also, that they don't receive credit towards the high school diploma. And they're working on how to get that data in there. I know some districts are adding in a 0 period or a 7th period to cover that so they can add in that data. But it really is based on whether the student receives college credit. They don't have to receive, doesn't have to go towards the high school diploma, although it may. So we're counting any course where they receive college credit. And we are working with the community college to see if we can share some data, but we won't be able to do that in time for we couldn't do that for this release, and we probably won't be able to do that for the fall 2018 release.
Regarding the calculation for chronic absenteeism, is there any minimum number of days a student needs to be enrolled in order to be counted in the calculation?
We haven't run our simulations, but we do anticipate that we'll have a minimum number of days. I'm not going to commit to what that will be until my staff actually have the opportunity to look at that data, and we share that data with our technical design group. They provide us with a lot of input into what would be the most statistically sound number to use.
Someone had a question about going back to the CCI and about the C- and college credit and how those are incorporated within the CCI. So
we are using C-. So if a student gets a C-, we're going to count them as taking a dual enrollment course. Of course, to be prepared, you have to take either 2 semesters or 3 quarters. So we are counting that as C-. I know that it is true that when those courses get transferred to some state universities or the UC system, they may not accept it if it's a C-, but that's the decision that was made for our accountability purposes.
There's a question about non-public schools being included in district aggregates.
So non-public school data is not included in the aggregates unless we're talking about special ed students. So for special ed students, particularly for the academic accountability, for the academic indicators, any student that is going to a private school is supposed to be tested, and those scores will go back to the district of residence.
Another question going back to DAS charter schools and distinctions if they're locally funded charters, what they have to do if they have local indicators or not.
So all charter schools, whether they're locally funded or direct funded, are required to report on local indicators. Now, it is true that it's based on what their charter, they report on the local indicators in their charter, but they still must report on local indicators. A couple more questions coming in on CCI. Why must the course be 2 semesters or 3 quarters? If they're only taking a 1-semester class, that's not counted as dual enrollment? They are counted. If they take a 1 semester, they get put in the approaching prepared category. But we're saying that you have to have 2 semesters to be considered prepared. And we did this a couple of years ago when we were working on the CCI. We did comparisons against how students who took one course versus two courses at the college level did on the EAP. Based on those simulations, we made the decision that you had to have 2 semesters or 3 quarters to be counted as prepared. But if you only do 1 semester, you are counted as approaching prepared.
Someone asked if the college career data was up yet, and yes, it is up and available on the dashboard for you to check out, so please go ahead and do so.
It is a little confusing because it does have NA there, so we're working on how maybe to better display that because we only have status data, but if you click, you'll see that you can click on the CCI. If you click on it, you'll see the data for status only.
Okay, I think if anybody has any last questions about anything, please share them now. A lot of questions are coming around about the PowerPoint being used, and we will share the PDF of the PowerPoint on our accountability website for you to have available.
Yes. So hopefully that will be posted either today or tomorrow, so you can go ahead and download it then. We have gotten questions in the past about whether we will have non-PDF files available. We will do that. I think we're going to go ahead and load that up onto the preview site where we have the data. I know that's what most people prefer because they want to be able to use a non-PDF file in their presentations. And just so we will have that. We have to PDF it, though, to post on the web for accessibility purposes.
A question about the enrollment on the dashboard for different student groups that seem to be different from DataQuest and how we get around there. Is there a data file that they can access?
So all the data files for the suspension, for all of our indicators are available for download. So we do have a site that we're providing for everyone who has access to the preview. And then when it goes public, those files will also be available to the public.
Will the student groups be formatted in the same order on the tabs of the dashboard for public release? So the current order that the student groups are displayed in, will that be the same order as public release?
Yes, it will be the same order. Unless we get a tremendous amount of feedback saying that the order is inappropriate. But yes, it is going to be the same order.
Someone was looking for our college and career indicator handout that was mentioned in a previous webinar and when that will be available.
Well, I do have staff working on revising our website right now, and hopefully by next week, all of those handouts will be available. But if you need it for something that you're going to be presenting before then, send us an email and we'll send it to you.
Okay. That looks like we got through all of the questions there.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We really appreciate you joining and getting the up-to-date information on our academic indicators and our chronic absenteeism. Again, we have one more webinar on December 6th, and we hope you will join us for that also. Thank you and have a nice day.